Silence is supposed to be the ultimate power move, right? You pull back, you go quiet, and the world is supposed to shift in your absence. They're supposed to notice, to miss you, to question everything they thought they knew about your presence. But here you are, waiting in that silence, and instead of it echoing, it's as if you're disappearing, fading further into the background while they carry on unaffected, untouched, unbothered. That sting you feel, that frustration, confusion, maybe even fear that this silence, this weapon you've been told is so powerful, might not be working at all. If that resonates with you, take a moment to press the like button and subscribe for more insights like this. Together, we'll uncover the truths you need to reclaim your power and build a life of strength and purpose. So folks, welcome back. Today we're diving into a question I know many of you have been asking yourselves. What happens when silence fails? We've all heard it before. Silence is strength. Silence is self-respect. Silence will make them reflect. But what if it doesn't? What if your silence feels hollow, invisible, powerless? That's where we step in, not to dwell on the failure, but to turn it into something transformative. Here's the thing, silence by itself isn't magical. It's not some universal law that bends people to your will. It's a tool, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on how you wield it. If your silence is rooted in fear, in longing, in hoping they'll come chasing after you, it loses its edge. It becomes transparent, predictable, easy to overlook. Let's be honest. People can sense when your silence is just a cry for attention disguised as strength. That's not silence, that's noise without sound. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Let that sink in for a moment, because the truth is, when silence doesn't work, it's not the silence that's broken, it's the energy behind it. If your mind is still tied to their reaction, still chasing their attention, your silence carries no weight. It's like holding a kite string in a storm. No matter how tightly you grip it, it's not going to fly if the wind isn't right. Think about it this way. Silence is only powerful when it comes from a place of genuine detachment. If your thoughts are still tethered to them, checking their social media, replaying old conversations, hoping for that one text, you're not really silent. You're just pretending to be. And that kind of silence, they can feel it. It whispers your intentions louder than any words ever could. But here's the part you might not want to hear. Sometimes they don't notice your silence because they never truly noticed your presence. That's a harsh reality to face, isn't it? But it's also freeing, because it's not about whether they see you or not. It's about whether you've been living in a way that demands respect, admiration, and attention without even trying. Silence isn't meant to manipulate. It's meant to reflect your inner strength. It's meant to say, "I don't need you to validate me. I'm whole on my own." Picture this, a flame trying to burn in the rain. No matter how bright the match is, if the environment isn't right, the fire won't last. That's what silence is without the right foundation. It's not about the flame itself. It's about the conditions you create around it. And when silence fails, it's not a sign to give up. It's a sign to rebuild, to go inward, to ask yourself, am I holding on to this silence as a weapon, or am I using it as a tool to grow? Fear wants you to panic in these moments. Fear wants you to believe that their lack of response means you're not enough. But fear is a liar. Your value isn't measured by their reaction. It's measured by the life you're building for yourself. And that's the shift we're going to explore together. How to turn silence into something that doesn't just demand attention, but commands respect. Here's the affirmation for today. My silence reflects my strength, not my longing. Write that down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments, and let it become your mantra. Because when you start believing that, when you truly start living it, everything changes. So stay tight, because we're about to break down what's coming next. We're going to uncover why silence sometimes fails and how you can rebuild it into the most powerful tool in your arsenal. It's time to stop fading into the background and start living a life so full and vibrant that their reaction, or lack of it, becomes irrelevant. Let's get into it. Number 1, the truth about silence. Silence is often painted as the ultimate weapon in emotional warfare, the go-to move when you want to regain control, leave an impact, or make someone realize what they've lost. But what if I told you that silence by itself is not the magic wand it's made out to be? That without purpose and intention, it can feel as hollow and ineffective as shouting into a canyon with no echo. You expect the world, or at least one person, to stop and notice your absence. Instead, all you're left with is the unsettling sound of nothingness, no shift, no change, just silence staring back at you. And that's when doubt creeps in, whispering, maybe silence isn't as powerful as I thought. The truth is, silence isn't the problem. The problem lies in how it's used, or rather, misunderstood. We've been sold a comforting lie that pulling back and retreating into silence will naturally make them miss us, reflect on us, or even come crawling back. But silence, when rooted in expectation rather than self-assurance, is powerless. It's not the weapon of strength we think it is. It's a reflection of our fear. Fear that we're not enough unless someone else validates our absence. Think about it. Have you ever fallen into the trap of using silence as a tactic, waiting for them to notice, wondering when they'll reach out? That's not silence. That's noise, disguised as quiet. It's the kind of noise they can sense, the hidden longing, the unanswered questions, the hope that they'll fill the void you've created. And when they don't respond, that silence feels like it's consuming you. But here's the truth you need to hear. Silence isn't meant to be a cry for attention. It's not a game or a strategy to manipulate someone else's emotions. Silence, at its core, is a tool. Like any tool, it only works when you know how to wield it. You wouldn't expect a hammer to build a house on its own, would you? The same goes for silence. Without intention, without meaning, it's just an empty gesture. Marcus Aurelius, one of the great philosophers, once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That's the foundation of true silence. Strength within, not reliance on what someone else does or doesn't do. Now let's break down the lie you've been told. The lie that silence by itself is enough to make someone realize your worth. It's tempting to believe that, isn't it? Because if silence could do all the heavy lifting, you wouldn't have to face the harder questions. Am I truly detached? Am I using this time to grow? Am I building a life that reflects my value, with or without their presence? The uncomfortable reality is that silence isn't a shortcut to their attention. It's a mirror of your own inner strength. If that mirror is cracked, they won't see clarity. They'll see confusion, longing, and desperation. Let's use a metaphor to drive this home. Imagine throwing a pebble into a still lake. When the pebble is small and weak, it creates ripples that fade almost instantly. But when it's powerful, deliberate, and thrown with intent, those ripples spread far and wide, leaving a lasting impression. Your silence works the same way. If it's hollow, rooted in waiting, hoping, or needing, it vanishes before it even begins to resonate. But if it's grounded in purpose, backed by action and confidence, it leaves an echo that lingers. But here's why it's difficult. Fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of fading into irrelevance. Fear that without their validation, your value somehow diminishes. That fear drives so many of us to use silence not as a reflection of strength, but as a plea disguised as control. And let me tell you, they can sense it. People are drawn to strength, not to desperation. If your silence feels like a tactic, they'll see right through it. If it feels like peace, true, unshakable peace, it becomes magnetic. You might be thinking, but why doesn't my silence work? The answer lies in what's beneath it. If your silence isn't paired with self-assurance, detachment and purpose, it's just empty space. It's the kind of silence they can ignore because there's nothing in it that demands their attention. Silence works when it's a byproduct of your growth, not when it's a tool for manipulation. If your silence doesn't speak to your strength, it becomes invisible. Picture this. Two people decide to go silent after a fallout. One spends their time obsessing, checking their phone, scrolling through social media, replaying every conversation in their head. Their silence is filled with noise, even if no one else can hear it. The other person steps back and pours their energy into themselves. They pick up new hobbies, reconnect with old friends, hit the gym, and focus on their mental health. Their silence isn't just an absence, it's a transformation. Now tell me, which silence do you think will leave a stronger impact? Here's the part where you rise above the lies you've been told. Silence isn't about them, it's about you. It's about reclaiming your power, focusing inward, and building a life that doesn't hinge on someone else's response. It's about standing tall in your truth, even when no one is watching. And yes, that's difficult. Growth always is. But it's the kind of difficulty that transforms you into someone unshakable. So if your silence has been failing, it's time to ask yourself, am I using this silence to grow, or am I waiting for them to notice? Be honest with yourself, because the answer to that question will change everything. When you shift your focus inward, when you stop tying your worth to their reaction, your silence becomes powerful, not because it demands their attention, but because it reflects your strength. Here's your affirmation for today. My silence isn't a void, it's a reflection of my strength and growth. Write that down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments to remind yourself and inspire others. Show them, show yourself, show the world around you what it looks like to reclaim your power, to use silence as a tool for transformation rather than a tactic for attention. And here's the thing. This is just the beginning. Stick around because next we're diving into how to pair your silence with purposeful action to create a life so fulfilling, so magnetic, that their reaction, or lack of it, becomes irrelevant. Let's turn that quiet into the loudest statement you'll ever make. Number 2, detachment, the missing ingredient. Silence without detachment is like a bird tied to a string. From a distance it might look free, soaring and gliding in the open air. But look closer and you'll see the truth. It's tethered, unable to truly fly. That's what happens when your silence isn't paired with genuine detachment. On the surface you've pulled back, gone quiet, stopped reaching out, but deep down your mind is still tied to their reaction. You're still checking your phone, replaying conversations in your head, or scrolling through their social media. You're not truly free, you're just pretending to be, and they can feel it. People sense when your silence is real and when it's an act. Genuine detachment carries weight. It's grounded in self-assurance and inner peace. But if your silence is rooted in waiting, in hoping they'll notice or miss you, it loses its power. It's like shouting into a storm, expecting to be heard. The effort is there, but the impact is lost. Here's the hard truth. Detachment is the missing ingredient that transforms silence into something meaningful. Without it, your silence is just empty space, and they'll fill it with their own distractions, their own priorities. They won't feel your absence because your energy is still chasing them, even if your words are silent. You might think, but I've pulled back. Isn't that enough? Number detachment isn't about pulling back physically. It's about pulling back mentally and emotionally. If your thoughts are still tied to their actions, your silence is hollow. It's like holding your breath underwater. You can only last so long before you resurface, gasping for air. True detachment is about letting go, not just of the actions you take, but of the expectations that keep you tethered to them. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Detachment is realizing that you can't control their thoughts, feelings, or actions. The only thing within your power is where you direct your energy. And if your energy is still tied to them, replaying scenarios or wondering what they're thinking, you're giving away the one thing you have control over, your focus. Think of detachment like untangling yourself from a web. Each thought about them, each moment spent watching their social media, is another thread keeping you stuck. The more you try to cling, the more tangled you become. But when you let go, when you stop feeding that energy, you free yourself. It's not easy. Letting go feels counterintuitive. Your mind convinces you that if you stop thinking about them, you'll lose your connection. But in reality, clinging only tightens the knots. Imagine this. You're holding a kite string on a windy day. As long as you hold on tightly, the kite responds to your every move, tethered and dependent. But the moment you release the string, the kite flies wherever the wind takes it. It's free, and so are you. That's detachment, letting go of the string, releasing the need to control where the kite goes. But how do you actually detach? Start by redirecting your energy. Every time you catch yourself thinking about them, what they're doing, whether they're missing you, pause. Acknowledge the thought, but don't feed it. Instead, replace it with action. Shift your focus inward. Hit the gym and push your limits. Pick up a skill you've always wanted to learn. Reconnect with old friends. Immerse yourself in hobbies or spend time in nature. Detachment isn't about ignoring them. It's about prioritizing you. It's not easy at first. Your mind will resist, tugging you back to the familiar comfort of obsessing over them. But each time you choose yourself instead, you're strengthening the muscle of detachment. You're training your mind to let go of what you can't control and focus on what you can. And here's the beauty of detachment. When you stop tying your energy to them, everything changes. Your silence begins to carry weight, not because it demands their attention, but because it reflects your inner growth. Detachment makes your silence unshakable. It's no longer about them. It's about you becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to chase, who doesn't need validation to feel whole. Think of a river flowing through mountains. It doesn't stop to wonder if anyone notices its beauty. It doesn't cling to the rocks or bend for anyone's approval. It simply flows, carving its path over time, shaping everything around it. That's the energy you want to embody, steady, powerful, and self-assured. So if you feel stuck, ask yourself, am I truly detached, or am I just pretending to be? Be honest, because the answer to that question will determine the strength of your silence. Detachment isn't about shutting off your emotions. It's about shifting your focus to what truly matters, your growth, your peace, your life. Here's your affirmation for today. I release what I cannot control, and I redirect my energy to what makes me stronger. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments, and let it remind you that true freedom comes not from holding on, but from letting go. And stay tight, because next we're exploring how to redefine your silence. How to turn it into a force so powerful that it leaves a lasting impact, not through manipulation, but through transformation. The journey to reclaiming your power is just beginning, and it starts with detachment. Let's make it happen. Number 3, redefine your silence. Silence is often misunderstood. So many people treat it like a game, a strategy to manipulate someone into noticing their absence. They pull back, cross their arms, and wait for the world to revolve around them. But when nothing changes, frustration sets in, and silence begins to feel like failure. Here's the truth. Silence isn't about them. It's not a weapon or a trick to bend someone else's will. Silence is a tool for growth, a space you create not to pull someone close, but to elevate yourself higher. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That's the essence of redefining your silence. It's about recognizing that silence isn't a move in someone else's game. It's a reflection of your control over your own energy. When you make silence about growth, it stops being reactive and becomes transformative. Imagine silence as a seed planted in fertile soil. That seed doesn't sprout the moment you cover it with earth. It needs time, patience, sunlight, and water. It needs the right environment to grow. But here's the catch. If you plant it in barren soil or neglect it, it won't grow at all. Silence works the same way. When you pair it with action, purpose, and intention, it flourishes into something powerful. But when it's rooted in waiting or hoping for someone else's reaction, it withers before it even begins. Ask yourself, why am I choosing silence? If your answer is, to make them miss me, to make them realize my worth, then you're planting your seed in dry, cracked soil. That kind of silence carries no weight because it's focused outward, dependent on their response. But if your answer is, to create space for my growth, to regain control over my energy, to focus on becoming the best version of myself, then you're setting the stage for something meaningful. The problem for most people is that their silence lacks purpose. They step back and do nothing. They wait, they watch, they count the days until the other person notices. And when the response doesn't come, their silence feels wasted. But here's what they miss. Silence is only as powerful as the actions you take within it. It's not the silence itself that makes an impact, it's what you do with that space. Think of it like this. Two people decide to go silent after a breakup. The first person stops texting and waits. Their days are spent overthinking, scrolling through social media, and hoping for a message. Their silence is hollow, a stagnant pause with no growth behind it. The second person, though, uses that silence as a reset. They pour their energy into themselves, hitting the gym, exploring new hobbies, connecting with friends, and setting new goals. They're not waiting for someone to notice their absence because they're too busy filling their life with purpose. That's the silence that carries weight, the silence that shifts the dynamic, not because they demanded attention, but because they grew into someone impossible to ignore. Here's the truth you need to hear. Silence isn't about absence. It's about presence, your presence in your own life. When you stop trying to manipulate someone else's perception of you and start focusing on how you perceive yourself, everything changes. Silence becomes more than just a pause. It becomes a statement of strength and self-respect. But redefining your silence isn't easy. It requires patience. Growth doesn't happen overnight, and neither does the shift in how others perceive your absence. You have to trust the process. Remember the seed. You won't see the sprout the same day you plant it, but that doesn't mean growth isn't happening beneath the surface. The same goes for silence. You may not see immediate results, but when paired with consistent growth, it becomes undeniable. Marcus Aurelius's wisdom applies here. You have power over your mind, not outside events. You can't control how someone else reacts to your silence, but you can control how you use it. You can turn that space into a time for self-discovery, for building something meaningful in your life, When you shift your focus from what they'll think to who you'll become, your silence gains depth. It stops being about them and starts being about you. So what does redefining your silence look like in action? It means redirecting your energy. Instead of waiting for someone to notice your absence, take that time to build yourself. Learn a new skill, pursue a passion you've neglected, strengthen your body, your mind, and your relationships with people who uplift you. Make your silence not just a pause, but a period of transformation. Think of a river carving its way through a valley. It doesn't wait for someone to appreciate its flow. It simply moves steadily and purposefully, shaping the landscape around it. That's what your silence should be: quiet, steady, and focused, with no need for acknowledgement. Here's your affirmation for today. My silence is not a pause. It is a time for growth and transformation. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments, not just for yourself, but as a reminder to others that silence isn't about retreating, it's about evolving. And keep watching, because next we'll explore how to pair your silence with the kind of action that commands respect. Not because you demand it, but because you've become someone worthy of it. Stay tight. It's about to get real. Number 4, when they don't notice your silence. When they don't notice your silence, it's easy to spiral. You start questioning yourself, your value, your entire approach. Am I not enough? Do I not matter to them? Was all of this for nothing? That inner dialogue can be ruthless, feeding insecurities you thought you'd left behind. But here's the truth. Their lack of reaction says more about them than it does about you. If they don't notice your absence, it's a reflection of their priorities, not your worth. And that distinction changes everything. Think about the sunlight. We don't stop to appreciate its warmth on our skin every day, nor do we marvel at the way it lights up our world. It's always there, so we take it for granted. But when the sun begins to set, we notice its absence. It leaves a void, a chill in the air, a shadow where there once was light. That's how your presence should feel. But if they don't notice, it might be because they were never truly paying attention to the light you brought in the first place. And that, while painful, is not your failure. Your worth isn't tied to their awareness. Let that sink in. If someone doesn't notice what you bring to the table, it doesn't mean the table is empty. It just means they weren't looking. And if their priorities don't include you, the solution isn't to shout louder, to try harder, or to break the silence to remind them. The solution is to pour that energy back into yourself, to build a life so fulfilling, so grounded, that their recognition, or lack of it, becomes irrelevant. Here's the hard truth. Sometimes people don't notice because your presence wasn't rooted in your strength. Maybe you gave too much, chased too hard, or tried too often to prove your value. And when that happens, your absence feels like relief instead of loss. That's not a reflection of who you are, it's a reflection of how you showed up. But the beauty of life is that you can redefine how you show up moving forward. Start by creating a life that's magnetic, not for them, but for you. Focus on your goals, your passions, your peace. Think of your silence not as an absence, but as an opportunity to build something extraordinary. Imagine a person who spends their silence mastering a skill, traveling, strengthening their body, and nurturing relationships that bring joy. Their silence isn't empty, it's full of transformation. And when they step back into the world, they're unrecognizable, not because they've changed for someone else, but because they've grown for themselves. Remember this, the right people will notice. They'll feel the absence of your light, just like the chill of the setting sun. But by then, you won't be waiting for them to notice. You'll be too busy shining, too grounded in your own worth to care. Here's your affirmation for today. My worth is not tied to their recognition. I am whole, radiant, and complete as I am. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments, and let it serve as a reminder to you and to the world around you that your value is undeniable, whether or not they choose to see it. And stay tight, because next, we'll uncover how to pair that silence with action, so powerful it reshapes not just how they see you, but how you see yourself. It's time to rise. Let's keep going. Number 5, the power of purposeful action. Silence without action is like a ship drifting aimlessly in the open sea. No direction, no purpose, no destination in sight. It's not going anywhere. It's just floating, waiting for something external, like the wind, to push it forward. And here's the truth. Waiting doesn't change anything. Silence, when paired with passive waiting, is nothing more than an empty pause. But silence with purposeful action, that's the calm before the storm. It's not just a break. It's the preparation for a transformation so profound it can shift your entire world. Think of a storm gathering in the distance. Before the thunder rolls, before the rain pours, there's a moment of stillness. A quiet that's alive with energy, with movement you can't see but can definitely feel. That's what your silence should be, not static, but alive with purpose, growth, and potential. It's a time to prepare, to recalibrate, to build a version of yourself that's stronger, more grounded, and completely unshakable. The difference between passive waiting and active growth is monumental. Passive waiting is rooted in hope that someone else will change, that they'll suddenly notice your absence or reach out to you. It's scrolling through your phone, checking their social media, and replaying the same thoughts over and over again. It's the illusion of stillness, but really it's just stagnation. Active growth, on the other hand, is transformative. It's taking the silence and using it to redirect all that energy you were wasting on them back into yourself. It's about focusing on what you can control, your growth, your goals, your happiness. This is where silence becomes powerful. It stops being about them and starts being about you. So what does purposeful action look like? Start with your personal goals. Maybe it's your fitness. Get into the gym, push your limits, and see what your body is capable of. Or maybe it's a skill you've always wanted to master. Learn an instrument, pick up a language, or dive into a creative project that excites you. Every small action you take towards self-improvement creates momentum, and that momentum builds strength. Strengthen your relationships, not with the person you're silent toward, but with people who bring value to your life. Reconnect with old friends, spend time with family, or surround yourself with those who uplift and inspire you. This not only reminds you of your worth, but also fills your life with meaning and joy. And most importantly, build inner peace. Use this time to practice mindfulness or meditation. Go for walks in nature, journal your thoughts. Silence is an incredible opportunity to reconnect with yourself, to tune out the noise of the world and listen to your own voice. Here's the truth. The storm you're preparing for isn't about them. It's about the person you're becoming. When you combine silence with purposeful action, you stop being a ship adrift and start being a force of nature, steady, intentional, and unstoppable. Here's your affirmation for today. My silence is not empty. It is alive with purpose, growth, and transformation. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments to remind yourself and inspire others to take action. Stay with me, because next we'll explore how to transform this inner growth into a quiet strength that radiates outward, making your silence not just noticeable, but unforgettable. Let's keep building. Number 6, stop playing their game. If your silence is just another move in their game, you've already lost. It might feel like you're in control, pulling back, going quiet, waiting for them to notice. But deep down, your silence isn't grounded in strength. It's reactive, tethered to their next move. And here's the hard truth. They can see through it. People sense when your silence is genuine and when it's just a calculated tactic. When it's the latter, it loses all its power. Marcus Aurelius said it best: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Silence isn't meant to be a strategy in someone else's game. It's a reflection of your mastery over your own thoughts and emotions. The moment your silence becomes reactive, designed to provoke, manipulate, or demand a response, it stops being about you and starts revolving around them. That's not strength. That's dependence disguised as control. Think of it like a puppet show. If your silence is attached to their reactions, it's like being a puppet on strings, moving only in response to them. Every thought, every action, every moment is tied to what they might say or do next. But what happens when you cut the strings? The puppet stops moving, yes, but you, the person behind it, reclaim your freedom. True silence isn't about trying to get their attention. It's about cutting those strings and stepping out of the performance entirely. The trap of reactive silence is that it keeps you in a state of waiting for their message, waiting for their acknowledgement, waiting for some sign that they've noticed your absence. But here's the truth: waiting is exhausting. It drains your energy, keeps you stuck in place, and puts your happiness in their hands. And let's be real, they aren't holding it with the care it deserves. So how do you stop playing their game? You shift your focus inward. You stop asking, "Will they notice?" and start asking, "What can I build while they don't?" Because their reaction, or lack of it, doesn't define your worth. Your actions do. Redirect the energy you've been spending on them and invest it into yourself. Pursue your passions, set goals that excite you, and create a life that feels full without their involvement. When your silence is no longer about them, it becomes unshakable. It's not about proving a point or waiting for their attention. It's about finding peace in your own growth. That's the kind of silence they can't ignore, not because it demands to be noticed, but because it radiates strength and independence. Here's your affirmation for today: I am not tied to their reactions. I am free to grow, thrive, and build a life that fulfills me. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments as a reminder that your power doesn't come from their attention, it comes from within. And stay tight, because next we're diving into how to transform that inner power into a presence that doesn't just demand respect, it commands it. Let's cut those strings and reclaim your freedom. It's time to step out of their game and into your own. Number 7, the transformation that makes silence work. Silence becomes powerful when it reflects who you're becoming, not what you're trying to prove. It's not about making them miss you or hoping they'll see your worth. True silence gains its strength from the transformation it represents, a reflection of your growth, your self-respect, and your independence. When your silence carries the weight of inner change, it stops being a void and starts being a force. Imagine a river carving its way through mountains. It doesn't stop to ask whether anyone notices its flow. It doesn't beg the rocks to move or the trees to admire its path. It simply moves forward, shaping everything in its way over time. That's what your silence should be, a steady, unstoppable force rooted in your growth and driven by your purpose. It's not about demanding attention, it's about becoming so strong and self-assured that your presence or absence naturally leaves a mark. But this kind of silence isn't born out of desperation or longing. It's born out of confidence and resilience. When silence comes from a place of needing validation, it's transparent. It feels weak, brittle, and easy to overlook. But when it comes from a place of strength, it's magnetic. It doesn't demand anything, it simply is. And that kind of silence speaks louder than words. Here's the challenge. Growth is uncomfortable. It requires you to confront the parts of yourself that are still tied to their reaction. It asks you to let go of the need to control how they see you or how they feel about you. And that's not easy. Letting go feels like losing control, but in reality, it's the opposite. It's reclaiming the control you've been giving away. Ask yourself, am I using this silence to grow, or am I waiting for them to notice? Be honest, because the answer to that question is everything. If your silence isn't paired with action, if you're not using this time to build yourself, to heal, to thrive, then it's empty. Silence without growth is like a river that stopped flowing. It stagnates, loses its power, and becomes unnoticed. So what does transformation during silence look like? It's hitting the gym and feeling stronger with every step. It's learning something new and surprising yourself with what you're capable of. It's reconnecting with people who remind you of your value. It's taking time for mindfulness, for journaling, for rediscovering who you are outside of anyone else's opinion. Every moment you spend investing in yourself adds weight to your silence. It's no longer about what they feel, it's about what you're becoming. Here's your affirmation for today. My silence is not a pause, it is the foundation of my transformation. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments as a declaration of your commitment to growth. Let the world know that your silence isn't emptiness, it's power in motion. Stay tight, because what comes next is where the real shift happens. Learning to embody the kind of presence that naturally commands respect. Your transformation is just the beginning. Let's keep building. Number 8. What to do when silence fails. When silence fails, it's tempting to feel defeated. You've pulled back, gone quiet, and waited for that spark of recognition, for some sign that they've noticed your absence. But instead, nothing has changed. No reaction, no acknowledgement, no shift. The frustration builds, and out creeps doubt. Did I do something wrong? Was all of this for nothing? Here's the truth. Silence alone was never meant to carry the entire weight of transformation. If it hasn't worked, it's time to reassess. Not to give up, but to adjust your approach. Think of silence as a flame. A flame has potential. It can light a room, spark a fire, or bring warmth to the cold. But if it's struck in the wrong conditions, against wet wood or in a rainstorm, it fizzles out. The match wasn't the problem, the environment was. If your silence hasn't ignited the reaction you hoped for, it's not because silence doesn't work, it's because the match wasn't struck in the right way. This isn't failure, it's an opportunity to redirect your energy to create the conditions where your silence can truly shine. So what do you do when silence doesn't work? You focus on what you can control, your growth, your mindset, your actions. Stop fixating on their reaction. Stop waiting for validation. Their acknowledgement or lack of it doesn't define you. What defines you is what you do with this moment. Here's where the real work begins. Redirect all the energy you've been wasting on waiting for them back into yourself. Silence was never meant to be passive. It was always meant to be a time for action, a space for growth. Start asking yourself the questions that truly matter. What am I building in my life right now? How am I growing? Who am I becoming in this silence? Take a good look at where your focus has been. Have you been holding on to the hope that they'll reach out, notice you, or miss you? If so, it's time to let that go. Their response, or lack of one, is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your health, your happiness, your goals. The moment you stop tying your worth to their validation is the moment everything begins to shift. Here's a metaphor to guide you. Imagine you've been holding on to a kite string, waiting for the wind to take it higher. But what if the wind never comes? Instead of standing there frustrated, you could let go of the string and start climbing the mountain yourself. You don't need the wind when you've got your own strength to move forward. That's what this moment is about. Letting go of external forces and relying on your own power to rise. Here's your affirmation for today. I let go of what I can't control and build the life I deserve. Write it down, say it out loud, drop it in the comments as a declaration of your strength. And remember, when silence fails, it's not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where you stop waiting and start creating. A chapter where your life becomes so full, so vibrant, so purposeful that their validation is no longer needed. Let's make that happen. So folks, silence is a tool, not the ultimate solution. Its power comes from the strength, growth, and confidence behind it. Like a tree, you don't need to announce your presence. Your deep roots of self-respect and resilience make you unshakable. When silence fails, it's not the end. It's a call to redirect your energy toward what truly matters, building a life so vibrant and fulfilling that their absence no longer leaves a void. If this resonates with you, press the like button, and for more, please subscribe this channel, and thanks for being part of the channel.